everyone, and welcome to So Very Wrong About Games, a board gaming podcast about board games. I am with my co-host, Michael Walker. How you doing, Walker?
Fantastic. We played a lot of games this week.
We did play a lot of games, and I just want to say that I've been reflecting on the nature of our little hobby, and there are a couple things that have been very much prominent in front of mind in the news lately that I just want to stress. There's been a lot of talk about social dislocation, about people not having connections with social groups. This has been a phenomenon we've been observing for decades, starting with bowling alone and now moving all the way to the dislocation caused by social media, people spending too much time on social media. And if anything, we are very fortunate in our hobby that both of these societal problems, they can be boons too, but both of these societal problems can indeed be addressed by some good old-fashioned board gaming.
It's true.
Sitting across from a fellow human being, not engaging in doom scrolling.
Out of arm's reach.
Well,
just to be sure.
Case dependent. Well, you might be playing Tiny Turbo. You might be playing Turbo Kids, right?
Yeah.
Then you gotta just wrap your arms around each other. But that presumably is not for your general board game night, meeting someone for the first time. That would be not good. Anyway, we're going to talk about board games this week. We're going to talk about the games we played last week, and as Walker said, there are a fair number. We're going to talk about the news and why it doesn't matter. And then our feature game, which is Thunder Road Vendetta, specifically the Carnival of Chaos expansion, which was recently fulfilled by Restoration Games. So, Walker, what'd you play last week?
Mark, we played a very interesting new trick-taking game called Fishing. This is designed by Friese. And I don't want to say it's like Fortress, because it's just sort of like an evolving trick-taking game. Like Fortress, where it introduces new interesting cards as you play. This is what happens. When you play the first round, it's pretty well a standard deck, and any tricks that you make are now going to form your new draw deck.
Yeah, if you win a card, it goes into your draw deck and your score pile.
And if you're short on the next draw, then you get to draw from the Special deck. And that's going to introduce all sorts of things, from zero cards, let you steal cards, to boys, which change up a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah, boys.
And then super high cards, like the standard deck goes 1 to 10. These new cards go right up to 18. So it introduces all sorts of fancy things. We only played it once. It goes 8 rounds, or if somehow they say there is a way that the special deck can deplete, but it goes 8 rounds, then whoever has the most points, because you score a point for every card you take in a trick. And so, since we only played once, I'm not sure if there's, I'm hoping there's going to be a strategy there to, like, how to win, or, like, should you win more tricks, less tricks, how to manipulate the cards. Because, there was still a little bit of standard trick-taking strategy about, making people play out. But I'm hoping that there's more through more plays.
So Walker made allusions to Fortress, which is the best game of the Fast Forward series that we tried. And the Fast Forward series is all about a simple card game that evolves as it goes, and it's like a 2-hour campaign thing. You sit down, and by the end of it, the game is very different from how it started, and you get to see the ideas iterate, the deck evolve, what you're doing changing. And we played Fortress, and it was a blast. It's one of those singular gaming experiences. Years later, I still remember it. I have no desire to go back to Fortress. We saw everything that it had to offer. And yeah, you can play with the finished version, very much in the same way that you can play Pandemic Legacy at the end of the campaign.
And it's super easy to reset, just so we're clear.
Yes. And I wasn't one of the reasons why I wasn't interested in going back to Fortress and leaving it in its final state was because I was very keen to reset it and let someone else experience the full thrust, the full arc of a game of Fortress. And indeed, I say arc. I was hoping that Arcs was going to feel somewhat like that, but alas, we still plan on going back to Arcs. The commissioners demand it very loudly. But Fishing is that applied to a trick-taking game. And as an experience, Fishing is very cool. As a game, like you, I've got no idea, because playing a trick-taking game, the Especial deck is where all the trumps start. So it's not even just that the suits are escalating in value, and you get these new special boy cards, more on those in a moment, but the trump suit is introduced in the Especial deck, and you're rewarded for not winning tricks. The worst case scenario is if you win a couple of tricks, meaning that you've got enough cards so that you don't pull from the Especial deck, and you only score a small number of points. And so you go into the next round and you're just going to eat it. You're going to eat it the entire time, because you might think, oh, well, you have all the cards used to win the trick. It's like, sure, 10 used to be the high card in the suit. Ain't anymore. Now it's 14. Good luck. And it's wild. So watching it change, everyone was just being surprised. Like, what is the high card in the suit now? We don't know.
Just to be clear, the special deck is graduated. So it's not as though it could be, anything from anywhere. It does slowly build it up as you play through the hand.
Sure, but in the context of a trick-taking game, whether the high card is a 12 or a 13 is massively consequential.
It's true. I just mean that you're not going to get an 18 suddenly and.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I do want to stress something about the boys, because they are super interesting. One way that it actually cuts the chaos a little bit are these boys. They are 0 value cards. They can be played at any time. They can be played off-suit. And one of them grabs initiative. So it's like, okay, you win this trick, fine, but I get to lead the next trick. And I thought that was a really, really cool innovation, because one of the big frustrations of a lot of trick-taking games, whether they're co-op, whether they're competitive, whatever other tricks they've got going on, no pun intended, is at a certain point, especially near the end of a hand, someone can just run the table. And having the ability to wrest initiative applied judiciously is, I think, really good. Now, whether it's applied judiciously in the context of fishing, again, I don't know. I'm curious to play it again, because I wonder if you can maintain a little bit of that joy of discovery while having a little bit more of an idea about how to play well, because I left fishing thinking that was a very interesting experience. I never really felt like I had any expectation about what would happen any given round to round. Precisely because I knew the game was escalating, I just didn't really know how. And so, can you maintain enough of that joy of discovery, but introduce a little bit of control? I don't know, but I'm curious to find out. Suffice to say, though, one way or the other, Friese is just operating on another level for most game designers. He has been playing around with legacy and campaign ideas for about a decade now, and it's fascinating to watch. And I, for one, am very, very thankful that we get to see these kinds of virtuosic experiments, even if they don't have legs.
Yep. Like you said, I just want to go out on those boy cards again, because there's other reasons why you want to play this. One lets you decide what color is going to be
the next trick.
The suit for the next hand as well, which also helps you get back on track too. You not necessarily lead it, but you might have a high one in that one. The other thing it lets you do, if someone leads a trump card and you were hoping to hang on to that one trump card to at least win a hand, now you're forced to play it against, this higher trump. But now instead you can play the boy card and, sort of get out of that hand and still hold your trump card. So they are very useful.
And that's Fishing by Friese. Probably we'll try it again. Played another game of Revive. Walker, speaking in terms of my personal gaming autobiography, there are times, especially over the course of the past 5 years or so, where I wonder if I'm out of step with contemporary Euro design sensibilities. And to a large extent I am. Like, I will play your Suki games, usually only once or twice, and then I find them very samey, with the exception of my very favorites like Pulsar 2849. I'm not a big fan of Vital Lacerda games, and the designers of heavier Euros, like Uwe Rosenberg, tend to be very iterative in nature, and so you talked about this in the context of Atiwa. Vladikavadl has not been seen in the wild since about 2017. I suspect he's hiding under his mountain of codenames money. And then a lot of the other Euro designers that I very much appreciate don't tend to design heavier Euros. But Revive, Walker. Every once in a while, I get to go back to some of the heavier-ish Euros of the past 5 years, whether it's Oak, whether it's Revive. These are not especially heavy, but the non-splotter, medium-heavy Euro games. And if they're the ones that I like, if I think they cohere, which is one of the things, that they're not a sprawling point salad, themeless, disconnected mess of arbitrary, one might even say random mechanisms, then I can very much appreciate them as a rule. At least I hope to. And going back to Revive was very much of this instance. I was playing with dedicated gamers, but whose bag is not necessarily heavier Euros. And during the rules explanation, I started getting that look. That glazed look of, oh my goodness, this is a lot. I'm like, no, don't worry. It's not a lot. Revive hangs together. I didn't use those terms, but I shepherded them through. By halfway through the game, everyone's like, oh, this is actually reasonably straightforward. I'm like, yeah, it is. You get to focus on the choices. You get to focus on exerting out your board position and making the smart play rather than struggling with just the rules. And so the number of rules questions just dropped to almost zero. People even started internalizing the iconography, but that's even a separate step. Revive is a marvelous medium-heavy Euro game designed by Helge Meissner, Eilif Svensson, Anna Wermlund, and Kristian Østby. If you are jaded with contemporary Euro design sometime, I recommend Revive. Revive. If you love contemporary Euro design, I recommend Revive. I recommend Revive for anybody that likes medium-heavy Euro games. We played without the expansion, without the Sapient Jellyfish, because, again, new players didn't really know how heavy they wanted to go, and it was probably the right call. The expansion rules might have just been a bridge too far. But as it is, there are 3 kinds of resources and 3 kinds of things that spend those 3 different kinds of resources. There you go. That's more or less the game. And then you get to graft on some very interesting card play and some interesting asymmetry and toys that you get to acquire over the course of the game. I love Revive. I've made no bones about it. Got to play Revive.
Got to introduce Dewey to Scout. We've talked about Scout a lot. This is an Oink game designed by Kajino. And it's a climbing game or a hand-shedding game, however you want to explain it. It's just continues to be interesting. I just love how you can play on a hand, but you just look at you can play on a round, but you look at your hand. It's like, well, I really need that card. It opens up my hand, so instead of playing, I'm going to pay off the person and grab a card.
That's how it works in theory. And then there's what Huey was doing to us, which was just grotesquely
sometimes
unfair.
you could just be dealt.
The 5-10s.
The perfect hand every time.
Every time.
And ruin the game for everyone else.
It's true.
But there you go.
If you are so committed to winning.
Yeah, if you're this, like an epic tryhard on a card game
absolutely.
That you're trying to have fun with your friends in, then, whatever.
Totally. It's weird because Scout, you play a number of rounds equal to the number of players. And I personally find that Scout is preferable with smaller numbers of players. 3 or 4. We were playing with 5. And the virtue and the reason why you play more rounds is because you want to try to even out the luck of the hand draw. But when the same player gets an amazing hand every round, what's the point?
The other really big choice you have in Scout is you have this car in front of you, because it totally makes sense in Scout.
Well, you're scouting circus performers.
You need a card. Because what it lets you do is not only scout a card, take a card from the table, thereby weakening the hand that's out there and put it into your hand, but then you get to play. So determining when to do this, like, do you want to do it in order to improve your play? Do you need to do this to stop someone else from winning or slow down the play? Just deciding when that is the best opportunity. Usually it's the worst time and you've handicapped yourself. But there you are.
Oh, well, it's a guarantee that the turn or two after you use the car, you're going to desperately regret that decision. It is the nature of things. Scout's marvelous, and honestly, I find that it suffers from luck of the draw, despite my joking. It was an epic victory on the part of Huey. He just completely dominated the entire game, but that's fine. It is the great virtue of Scout that you get to craft your hand, and so it is often a case of what you decide to do with your hand rather than what you're dealt. And one of the things that the last session really emphasized to me, and this is one area where I think I'm making slight progress in terms of my play of Scout, it's less about sometimes it is less about trying to make the best possible set available and more looking at your hand and thinking about what to do with the ones. Because you got to get rid of those ones somehow. Now, it might be right next to a whole bunch of other ones, in which case that's great. Ain't no problem playing them. Maybe they're right next to the 2 and a 3, you're fine. But if you just got a single lone 1 sitting around there, it is going to be a millstone around your neck, and you are never getting rid of it. So, I love Scout. It is marvelous. It is my favorite of the Oink games. I think it is a fabulous climbing game, and it really does. It's one of those great design decisions where it's like, how do I address the luck of the draw? How do I mitigate the fact that in a lot of climbing games, it's just some people get dealt amazing cards and some people don't? Can we make making your hand part of the game? And Scout does it brilliantly.
Scout, I'm wondering, have you seen the widespread version, the one that
the mass market one?
Yeah.
I've seen it in stores. I have not handled it.
I'm wondering if they're normal size cards, because that'd be interesting. Because the Oink ones are thin and narrow, whereas that could be like nice, wide, standard size playing cards, which would be nice and interesting.
I believe they are bigger than the ones in the Oink. Right. I cannot speak to whether they were bridge or poker size, though.
All right, that's Scout.
Played a game of MLEM. MLEM Space Agency by Reiner Knizia. It's a push your luck dice game, and as per usual in Reiner Knizia dice games, he detests the number 6. If it's not in Don't Llama Dice, he's not going to put a 6 on there. He's going to take the 6 and he's going to turn it into a rocket or a chicken or a bone or something. It's his nature. It's his way. I don't know. I don't question such decisions. MLEM it's okay. The thing is that MLEM in the base game of the box comes with a whole bunch of different modules. And some of them I'm increasingly of the opinion are pretty much a necessity because MLEM shows a great big track up to space. Your cat's in a space agency. Don't ask. It's fine. And they're indeed one of the cats you start with. Every cat you have is a token that can be placed out for scoring, and they each have a special ability. One of them doubles the score if it gets into deep space. You are not getting to deep space unless you are using some of the modules. Flat. And so it's one of those cases where I think the additional rules load is more than paid off by the simple fact that you're creating, I think, a false expectation when you just explain the nature of the game. You just show them this big track and you say, okay, one of the core cats you start with doubles the points in deep space. You're not getting there. It's not happening. It's possible. It's theoretically possible. I'm sure if you've done it, please send all your remarks to support@aircanada.ca. I'm sure it happens. But in all the games that I've seen, we've never come close. So it's purely in the realm of theoretical. And what you're doing, therefore, is further putting the people in early rounds at sea because they don't know what the expected values are. And they know that there's this possibility of getting someplace very... Anyway, a number of the modules, they're very simple, and they give you a bit of a leg up, and so they help give a better sense of toys. There's a toy factor. Interesting things are more apt to happen. You get a few more decisions about when to cash them in, or about how to use them, or when to use different cats, and it makes a better sense of an arc for the game. And so I don't think I'll ever consent to play the base game of MLEM Space Agency ever again. I think I might, nudge people, even if it's their first playing, towards playing with a module or two, if for no other reason than it just opens up the rest of the board. So that is MLEM Space Agency. It is not one of my preferred Reiner Knizia Press Your Luck dice games, but I'm always happy to play a Reiner Knizia Press Your Luck dice game.
I got Unconscious Mind to the table. All of the table.
There was no table left.
Because this thing takes up the whole table. I think you have three player boards, and then multiple boards in the middle. It's this... Freud is involved. And concepts of helping people through psychiatry. You have this sort of, I think they're called insight board. And I think the whole game, let's say the game revolves around this insight board. It's 3 different colors, and you have 3 levels of each color, and they're just sort of like different parts of the human psyche, and you have a bunch of beads that you get to put on this board, and a lot of the game is moving them around this board, because in order to cure the patients they need certain levels of these different colors. So you're spinning them off this board, you're manipulating this board around. That part was interesting. It has these nice clear cards, so you have your patients, you have your couch, your patient comes in, it'll tell you on the bottom, the benefit it's going to give you after you cure them. It's going to, modify one of the actions that you get to do. And then you put these clear overlays on top, which blocks those out until you cure them. They're going to give you some points. And then you get these Dixit-like dreams. You get a nightmare type one, and then a happy type one. And that they're going to give you points towards curing them. And they're going to tell you what kind of tokens they need in order to do it. So you're manipulating your board, trying to get these tokens to do that. And then on top of that, there's this whole Vienna or Paris, wherever Freud was from. Who cares?
He was in Vienna, but he was very influential in the Paris scene, from what I understand.
Yeah. So it's mapping, you're moving around, and there's a whole way to manipulate that board as well. But it just seems to be all these steps too far, because there's all sorts of stuff on top of that as well. There's this whole inkwell board on top of that, because when you're done your turn, after you've taken your action, depending on where that action is on this track, it's going to give you some ink, and then you go over to your little ink rotation thing, and then it's going to activate a whole line of stuff as well that you've upgraded. And so that...
Gotta have them combos.
Makes your turn even that much more longer. So you're trying to upgrade that board on top of everything else, because, you gotta have combos. Anyway... It plays up to 4. I'll never play it at more than 2. Again, I think it will be
2, not even 3.
Not even 3.
Wow.
We played 3, and it was just too long. I think it'll play great at 2. I think there might be something there. I think manipulating everything together might be interesting. I am not sure. I am going to find out. Unconscious Mind, it's like a new crowdfunding project that just was issued out. It is published by Fantasia Games and designed by Lucas and Johnny Pack, Yoma, and Antonio Zach.
I'm waiting for the expansion, which I believe consists of dime bags of cocaine and inappropriate pictures of your mother.
The funny part is, is that there are tons of expansions that we didn't even use. And it is said that in order to make it a game, you should be playing with these expansions, which we didn't even... Yikes. It is a lot. Unconscious mind.
We finally played SETI. Walker didn't want to put 2024 to bed and do the 2024 year in review until we played SETI, which was CGE's offering for 2024. And it's similarly a sort of a medium-heavy Euro. It is about the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, at least nominally. Walker has a much, much better theme, which he'll get to in a moment. And I have to say that I was worried that it was just going to feel like another Vladimir Suki, even though it's not designed by Vladimir Suki, because CGE, when it does Euro games, definitely has a kind of a vibe. And that was originally by Vlada Kavatel. He's long gone, and now we're left with the sort of Suki paradigm. And often I find a lot of those works to be relatively interchangeable. Like, good for a player or two. You know, you can Praga Cap at Regni for a little bit. Maybe you might want to do some woodworking with Vladimir next time. A couple of clever things here and there. Happy to play them, but nothing that really grabs me that wants me to keep coming back. I wasn't blown away by SETI, but I was pleasantly surprised. I was expecting to be pretty unengaged, and I thought it was okay. You've got multi-use cards that have victory conditions and bonus actions and bonus resources, but the real meat of the game and how it kind of hangs together is the solar system. You're launching probes, you're scanning things, you're trying to land probes or land probes in orbit. They're not really very proby. They're kind of like jack-of-all-trade spaceships kind of deal.
It's like where you have interest token.
Yeah, there you go. And whatever machinery you happen to need there, that happens to be what the token is, which is fine. I mean, and I'd much rather do that than the incredible laborious process that you might have in something like High Frontier or anything of that nature. Not a whole heck of a lot of player interaction, at least none of the satisfying kind. And it's mostly just a question of, okay, I've got very limited resources. You're always starved for money and energy, which are the only two resources. How do I try to eke out as best as possible these kinds of combinatoric points? But it's just shy of point salad, I'd say. It's almost there. But again, when I play a Euro of this weight, what I want it to do is I want the actions to cohere, and I want the scoring to be relatively focused. It's not quite to my preferences, but I found SETI to be mildly surprising. What about you, Walker?
No, I enjoyed it. I love the fact, like you said, multi-use cards. I love how they did the sort of display of those cards. It's like a little pool of 3, and that's used in many ways. Like in different actions, just sort of reference different parts of the cards for different reasons, which I liked. And not only when you get cards, you can choose from there as well. And
on the topic of the cards, they are going for a sort of Terraforming Mars vibe of like near future projects or currently existing projects in the search for extraterrestrial life.
Speaking of vibes like other games, this has a very Gaia Project vibe to it. It's got the, you play until you run out of resources, and then you pass, and then the other players go. It has the goals that you're looking for. It has the sort of build your engine up so your turns will take longer, getting you more resources, let you do more things faster than everyone else.
It does not have the round-on-round goals, nor does it have a sort of, you would say tableau builder, I would not call it that, board where you're uncovering better income spaces by building things out, though, just as a note.
No, it's sort of like the reverse. You're bringing these techs in, and they're not terrible either. They're kind of interesting, because a lot of the cards reference them. Long story short, you are trying to discover
extraterrestrial intelligence.
You know, some sort of evidence that aliens exist. And so there are 5 alien cards. You're sort of supposed to keep it ambiguous about what they're going to do. They're random. You put them out. You're not supposed to see them until they flip over. Anyway, there are a lot of interesting things going on in SETI. There are some odd things. There's this sort of like scoop in the back door scanning action where, you know, getting in there early gives you hardly any benefit whatsoever. And
it's a little tricky. I mean, I realize for all my complaints, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. So at various sectors, whether it's like Proxima Centauri or something else, there's a certain number of spaces that you can occupy. Once all the spaces are occupied, whoever's occupied the most spaces gets a large bonus. Everyone else gets a very, very, very small bonus. Second place player gets a tiny consolation prize. Normally in that case, my preference is that in cases of a tie, because with 6 spaces, you're going to end up with ties relatively often, that whoever got there first should break the tie. The problem is that can sometimes encourage people to forsake spaces and just leave them for one player to finish them by themselves. And SETI, and this is another complaint I have about SETI, where you get to fill those spaces at what time you get to fill what sectors when is often semi-arbitrary feeling because it's a function of exogenous factors of other people's actions, unintentional consequences, and things of that nature. Here, the tiebreaker is in favor of whoever placed last, so there's an encouragement to actually go finish the thing, but I felt that it erred a little bit too far in the incentive to finish it as opposed to the finish to get it started, but that's a minor issue. The bigger thing about randomness, though, is it's more just a mental framework, because when the aliens get discovered, quote-unquote, it introduces a new board, new scoring opportunities, new game mechanisms sometimes.
Fancier cards
And different cards and weird things. And it's a bit of an awkward fit with a very planning-focused, tight resource game. For roughly halfway through your game of SETI, be like, surprise! Here's this thing. And you can, I think, reasonably, in the context of the rules explanation, just say, look, this is going to get revealed when all 3 of these colors have been placed. It is in your strong interest to be there when that happens. To what extent? Can't really tell you, but it's in your interest. I don't know. I was kind of there for it. I liked what it introduced, but as I say, it was an awkward fit.
Yeah, it's very much action efficiency. You're going to do well if you can fit everything in. It is a bear to set up and tear down, but I really enjoy how the actions are very simply explained. I think the explanation, and I'm not just patting myself on the back, I think anyone who explains this game has a decent go of it, because the actions are fairly straightforward. They all sort of tie together. Each of the 3 major actions has sort of a color that lets you put tokens out somewhere, and these tokens are the ones that are used for the
big scoring
opportunities. And it's pretty straightforward. It's all nice and color coordinated. Your player board is pretty fantastic at showing you all the actions that you get to do and how much they cost and how you can improve them.
Yeah, the information presentation is very good. The rules load is very good. As I say, there are lots of reasons to prefer SETI over a lot of other games of its ilk, even though it is kind of in a genre or idiom that is not my preferred one. And so it does stand out amongst its peers in a relatively obvious way.
I felt it made more sense thinking that the aliens were after our blueberries, Mark.
Do tell, Walker.
You see, blueberries, they're very good for expanding your mind.
I hear it's a superfood.
Not only do they not want us to expand our mind, but they want to expand their own mind. So they've taken our blueberries.
All the data tokens are sort of a shade of blue, by the way.
So that's why you have to go get those back. Not only that, you need to... We all represent different lobbyist groups of the other produce.
So we swap out the blueberries
pumpkins
with the pumpkins.
And apples and asparagus, these things. And we need to get the aliens, because we need to make money. This is a new market that's opened up.
Of course.
So we need to open up restaurants themed around our produce and start planting our produce out on the other planets.
You got to have a nice produce stand orbiting Mercury.
These things make much more sense than what they've done.
Well, for my part, Michelle, I confess I was quite overwhelmed. On my way from the chaise lounge to the chifforobe, I was overcome by the vapors and had to swoon upon the settee.
Yikes. And so that's SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. I just wish we could find here some on Earth.
That's a classic, but it's a good one. We played Kollide. Magnets, Walker. Every game should have magnets. We had a brief discussion about magnets after playing Quinn last week. Still mean to get Quinn back to the table. And I was talking about Polarity. I've never played Polarity. It is a classic. There are some people who stan Polarity the way that I stan Lupin Louie. That is a game where it's just an abstract circle mat. You put a magnet in the middle, and then you're leaning magnetic discs playing around with the evolving magnetic field. I traded for sad story. Everyone's going to weep uncontrollably. If you're driving a car while listening to this podcast, I encourage you to pull over, because soon your entire vision is going to be obscured by tears of sympathy. I traded for a copy of Polarity, and what I received was about a third of the components of the game and without the central magnet piece. And I talked to the guy who sent it to me and said, this is not a game. This is not playable. And he's like, oh, I've got back problems. I'll get back to you. That was 3 years ago. I'm never hearing back from this person. Anyway, Kollide. You talked about how there was this mass market game featuring magnets. Kollide is a very simple magnet game. A little too simple, I think. The magnets are great. Magnets are great. You have these chunky gold plastic things with very strong magnets in them with a north and a south. And what you do is you set out a play area of a string that is roughly about 14 inches in diameter or so. And you place a magnet piece, and just your goal is to place all your magnet pieces out without causing other magnetic pieces to adhere to them.
To collide, Mark.
To collide. It's collide with a K, though, just in case you're looking for it. It is collide with a K and an E at the end, so maybe it's Kollide. I don't know.
It is a reprint. This is an older... This was done long ago, and now this is a reprint that is now in Walmart.
Yes, and you can tell that it's a mass market game in big box stores because it is uncredited, as many of those games are. It was a little too simple. I would have liked a little something. Maybe, this is just spitballing, something along the lines of, maybe it's in your interest to have two pieces collide to each other, but any more than that is dangerous, because effectively what you're doing is you look at the largest empty space on the board and you place your piece in the middle of it. That is more or less it. I don't know that I'm missing some deeper subtlety, or if there could be deeper subtlety, but that was my strong...
Like I said, it does show the
impression.
negative and positive, so you could look at the board and see which ways we're facing and therefore orient your piece to the right.
I would be in favor of that, were it not for the fact that the visual difference is sufficiently subtle that once it hits the table, it's very difficult to observe.
It's true.
Maybe stickers. Maybe if there were stickers everywhere.
Yeah, maybe just put a little black line on the negative side.
Maybe.
That's Collide. We got Gun It back to the table. This is a review copy that we were given by designer Randy O'Connor and Randio Games. And it's sort of like a car chase. Picture any car chase in any movie. What was our little mission for this one?
The scenarios are kind of cute. The scenarios in order are, there was this pulp, in theory, in the universe of the game, there's a pulp novel that was published in the 1950s, and then there was a movie adaptation that became a classic in the 1960s, and then there was other scenarios like the maligned sequel to that great movie. Anyway, I did find the overall scenario setup very amusing.
And so... off we go. We are surrounded by enemies, sometimes civilians, and you need to quickly puzzle it out under a timer, who gets what weapon, which way they're going to shoot, and in which order they're going to shoot. And this time there was some very interesting sort of, because there's some events that sometimes happen. You pick up an event, and the person gets to decide left or right. And this one was every time a car got, or for one of the rounds, it was every time a car got damaged, it would spin. So it would totally change, because when a car blows up, sometimes it's going to do collateral damage. And you have to take this into account, because this is how you're going to get your big combos. And so they were spinning, and you had to take into account where the spin was going to finish. And anyway, I found it much more puzzly and much more interesting this time than I did the first time.
I love the theme of Gun It. I love the structure of Gun It. I love the moments of Gun It. I love the scenario design. I love the way that during setup, every person gets to make a contributing decision about how the overall structure of the game is going to go. It is the scoring and victory conditions of Gun It that make me bounce off the game almost completely, because it is extraordinarily puzzly in precisely a way that I don't really appreciate. It is the case that so far the scenarios reward exclusively combo destruction of vehicles. And that's fine, but what that requires you to do is really suss out the timing and exploit the collateral damage to the nth degree. And some people love doing that, particularly under time pressure. I do not find it an interesting spatial puzzle to go through. So unfortunately what it does is it runs exactly into my distaste of spatial puzzles, of order puzzles. Like, okay, well, you fire the Uzi, you soften it up, and then somebody else can use this item, and that softens that up, and that allows somebody to shotgun this vehicle, which will cause that to blow up, and that to blow... Oh, no, wait, we're in the wrong position. Okay, start again. And by that point, the timer's over, at least according to my mental faculties. That's the limit of my ability. And then a whole bunch of unsatisfying arbitrary things happen, and there you go, you lost your round. And it is built around generating massive combos. You can, in both the scenarios we tried, you do not progress the score unless you do that. And that is not what I enjoy doing.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's two things. I wouldn't mind trying it one more time, because sometimes you get it in your head that if things don't blow up or die, we're going to take a bunch of damage. We don't take damage. We can go a whole round not blowing anything up.
It's true.
I think that sometimes it's hard to bring in, because we played so many games where, killing stuff now is better than killing stuff later.
That's a solid point.
One, I feel as though the timer is a little short as well. So maybe we should try it and just say, okay, well, we're not going to kill. Make sure we don't need to kill stuff.
Or we could use an easier difficulty level. They do say that if you, using the included sand timer is sort of the medium difficulty level. If you want to make things easier, you can use a digital timer with more time and or get rid of the timer altogether.
So maybe try it with that sort of mindset. and just weaken everything up and get ready for bigger combos every other round as opposed to trying to destroy everything every round.
That's fair. As I say, though, I enjoy everything that you do in Gun It. I just don't like the overall victory conditions that are attached. But you're right. Now with a little more experience under my belt and with the ability to just take things slow and be patient, I might have a better way of doing things.
And that is Gun It, a review copy we got. We got to play Harmonies. I brought it along on a game day, and I was waiting for us to be able to play a short game because I just love Harmonies. It's a great game from this year. Looks colorful. The art is fantastic. The teach is easy. The play flows great. You grab some discs, put them on your board. You're trying to put them on your board in certain ways for multiple different reasons. You're looking at the display of animals and trying to fit them into how you've placed the discs in a way that's going to score you some points. Everything about Harmonies is a joy.
Everything, Walker?
Everything.
Absolutely everything?
Absolutely. Especially when someone takes the gosh darn
You watch your mouth, sir.
discs that you wanted, that you explained to them that you wanted, and then they took them obviously on purpose to hurt you on a personal level.
So here's what I don't like about Harmonies, and it's getting to me more and more every time I play. I agree with almost everything you say. Harmonies is delightful on many different axes. The part that I find increasingly frustrating is that the creation of trees or the creation of buildings require discs to come out in the right order. So in the case of trees, you want wood to come out and then grasslands. Or grass, whatever it is. In a variety of games that I've played, there's just been this weird distribution of the order in which discs come out of the bag. In this particular play we did, the ratio of green to brown coming out of the bag in the early games was so high that people who needed to build trees couldn't, and by the time the brown came out, all the greens had already been placed, and so there was no ability to finish the trees that we might start, so the wood was just wasted. Now, consequently, you're left in this position at the early game of setting up your board and or taking scoring cards and or setting up your overall board position, left with this risk calculation that you're utterly unequipped to substantively evaluate. If it were just a question of then ending up with a crappy score, whatever. It's a quick game. It's very light. I don't mind losing. It's fine. I'm accustomed to it. I have a lifetime's worth of experience. But it's just oddly frustrating to say, okay, well, I'd like to build a nice little display of trees and maybe a mountain range over there and maybe a nice little river and things. The mountain you can wait for. It'll wait. The river, it's a little trickier. The trees, on the other hand, no. Things have to come out in the right order. Buildings, things have to come out in the right order. And if the bag doesn't cooperate, there's nothing you can do about it. If another player were snaking the discs away from me, whatever, that's competition. That's playing a game. But when the bag just decides, we're not going to have any trees this game, I find it's a big downer.
It's true. Stop taking animals that need trees.
Clearly.
Get good. That is Harmonies.
Wow. I can't believe I get gooded twice in a row.
Lastly from me, we had another review copy. This is called Gudnak. This is by Timothy O'Brien and Ian Oliver, published by Chaotic Great.
That's a pretty good name for a game company, I gotta say.
And there's been a lot of games like this. It's a card game, sort of army battler, where you're moving units around this grid that are cards, and they fight each other. And this one focuses more on the special abilities because the combat is relatively non-existent. It's more of a abstract outmaneuvering or lining up the right units because
soldiers only have 1, 2, or 3 as their strength, and if you do not have more strength than the thing you're attacking, you're going to die. So
the combat's quick. It's more trying to utilize the special ability of your unique faction. And the factions are very unique and interesting. They all do different things. They all manipulate the board and or your units and or your opponents in different ways.
Your faction did some interesting things. My faction did more or less the standard undead stuff. Units, when they die, they don't stay discarded. They come back and can be resummoned. Standard instantiation of pretty well-worn fantasy tropes. I'm not objecting. I'm just saying.
I'm saying in this particular game, that's very useful because you die.
It's totally useful
when your deck.
It's just your faction had some interesting effects that I hadn't seen before. Like, for example, you had one creature that while it was in the corners, it could treat all corners as adjacent, and so I suddenly had to worry about being attacked from across the side of the board or you showing up out of nowhere, just showing up with a casserole being like, hey, that was interesting. I'm not saying that my faction was underpowered. It was very, very useful. It's just it was standard undead stuff that I've seen half a dozen times before in games of this ilk.
And so units have a variety of symbols, and there's another mechanic that I think can be utilized with multiple plays, is the fact that units can stack. As long as they have a matching symbol, you can make a stack of units, and so only the top units of the stacks fight. So I'm sure there would be a way that you could layer units that would make it more advantageous as you advanced up the field, but that's yet to be seen, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's to prevent the situation where, since units can only be summoned at the very back rank, closest to your theoretical stronghold, if you were limited to one unit at a time, they could spend a variety of actions, because movement's relatively slow, which is fine. Lends it a sort of a slightly abstract positional feel. If they would then just die on their way there, it would just might be a little sluggish and a little sense of zugzwang. As it is, you can stack up 3, 4, as many as you like. 3 or 4 is somewhat unusual, but you can stack up units so that only the top one is vulnerable and create a sort of inexorable advance that is more difficult to stop without thinking creatively. And I agree, it adds a considerable dimension to the planning and card play of Gudnak.
Because this is what happens if you get one of these units in front of your opponent's entrance, then they have to start discarding more cards. And like I said, that would be the death of you when your deck is empty. So anyway, I don't mind. There was enough factions. I wouldn't mind trying it a couple more times.
There's also deck construction. We played with pre-constructed decks. I have to say it's distributed in a very good format because it's a small box. It's got all the factions in there. It has recommended starting decks pre-sorted, and then all the other cards of that faction. So if you want to get involved in deck construction, you can do so right away. But if all you want to do is pull out a starting deck and go to town, you can do that too. And I wish more card games with recommended starting decks did that instead of just having... I realize it's hard. Setting up card games is difficult, the way things are printed and then assembled. Usually it's going to be somewhat arbitrary and difficult to anticipate. But if you're going to have the possibility of laborious card sorting, having it done for you already is very appreciated.
That spaceship game, I think, did sort of the same thing. Imperium
the Contention.
Yes. So many Imperiums, Mark. It's hard to get them all.
I know. It's difficult. I cannot blame you.
So that's Gudnak.
I wouldn't say it's perfect, but I'd say it's Gudnak.
Yikes. That's 2. Anyway.
What, I have a limit? You've never had a limit before. Finally played Good Puppers. Good Puppers is, by full disclosure, a personal friend of mine, Chris Cheslick of Asmati Games, and I really appreciate how it's really an act of game design efficiency as far as I'm concerned, because Good Puppers looks at a lot of Euro games, not even unlike games of SETI's nature or Revive, and says, okay, these sort of combinatoric, puzzly scoring where you're trying to max out a variety of different scoring conditions, like, okay, I have to work to get that scoring condition and work to get the resources that trigger that scoring condition for the end of the game. What if that was more or less the entire game? And so in Good Puppers, what you're doing is there's this very simple auction element where you're getting new cards into your tableau that trigger special abilities, and also each suit has its own scoring condition. And you're getting bones, you're improving bones, and it's very simple, very straightforward, incredibly adorable, but at the same time, very ruthless and straightforward and focused in terms of how it focuses in on this scoring condition maximization. And it's very brief as well, easy to explain and teach. And so while that isn't my preferred version of scoring, of setting up these somewhat baroque combinatoric scoring conditions, if you're going to do it, this is the way I like it to be done. And so I always like to pull out Good Puppers every once in a while, even though I have to say I like dogs well enough, but I'm not necessarily the target audience. I'm not the kind of person that would go and frequent a website like Can I Pet the Dog, for example.
Can I pet that dog?
Is that the appropriate?
Oh yeah, that's the meme. That's the YouTube audio short.
Oh, okay.
It's a young child desperate to pet a dog, and man, oh man, is it amazing. I love it.
Fair enough. So that's Good Puppers by Chris Cheslick and Asmati Games.
And that's the games we played this week. Now a brief break while we pay some bills. And now we're back with the news and why it doesn't matter. Mark, I love Orleans. Got to play Caspan. It's not like a pat in the back, but it's more like the system works.
What system, Walker?
The system of, you go on to Board Game Geek, you go into the forums, and you tell people, it's like, we should contact Board Game Geek and tell them that we want this. If we all click on this link that I've provided,
improved discs for the plague counters,
and we get not so much improved as in you've already improved these discs. If you don't improve this expansion, then we can't play it with your improved discs.
Classic punishing the early adopters kind of thing. Yes.
And so apparently people clicked on this link, and the Board Game Geek people also came onto the thread and said, "Don't worry, we're going to make them." And they came, and now I have them. So the system works.
Okay.
And in that vein, Rise and Fall. You have a piece missing. You send away. You say, "Hey, I'm missing a piece," and the piece comes in the mail, and you have the piece.
I will say, getting a replacement piece when there was something literally missing from the thing you purchased, I dare say that's a pretty low bar. That should be expected.
It should be, but it doesn't always work.
You're right, sadly.
So you always have to, if we complain, then we have to praise. So there's some praise.
I guess. Fair enough. You've convinced me.
All right, so like Mark said earlier, now that SETI has been played, we are now set up to do our end of the year episode, which you should tune into next week.
Also, this episode is a multiple of 5, where we acknowledge the existence of our Patreon. If you're inclined to support free and independent media, please do visit patreon.com/svag. Tons of bonus content, tons of great stuff. Patreon-exclusive Discord, opportunity to vote on games, get free games. On the topic of free games, we have been paying attention to the wildfires on the West Coast. We have made some donations to a variety of causes. It is truly tragic, and I was thinking about what we could do, and frankly, we're not really in a good position to raise a whole lot of money ourselves other than just draw attention to whatever causes we can. Here's what I'm proposing, and I can't promise anything's going to come of it. If you, or anyone you know, has lost games in the context of the fires, reach out, let me know, and I will try to make you whole, at least for some of the more difficult to find games. My game finding mojo isn't necessarily what it once was, but if there's something that you lost that is not easily replaceable, drop me a message and I will try to activate whatever connections I have and try to make sure that you can get at least some of your games back. This is a promise I make to you. So our hearts go out to everyone that's been affected by the fires out west. Please do stay safe, and we hope that the damage will be contained as best as possible. That is the news, and why it doesn't matter. We now move on to our feature game, which is Thunder Road Vendetta. Designed by roughly the population of a small town. Dave Chalker, Noah Cohen, Rob Davio, Justin D. Jacobson, Brett Myers, Brian Wolf by Restoration Games. This is a review copy we got from the publisher. This is indeed a redevelopment of an older game that is Restoration Games' oeuvre. So this is Thunder Road Vendetta as opposed to Thunder Road, the original one. Specifically, we're going to be talking a fair bit about the latest expansion to Thunder Road, which is to say Carnival of Chaos, designed by a subset of the entire village, which is to say Noah Cohen, Rob Davio, Justin Jacobson, and Brian Neff. Walker, why don't you give us an unhelpful summary about what one does in Thunder Road?
Well, you're mostly just waiting around, maybe finishing your drink while your friends finish the game because all your cars have exploded.
I'm sorry, Walker, you were in the way.
So, we've all wanted a game like this, like, Mad Max.
Yep.
Some sort of post-apocalyptic roadway roaring down there in a revving engine, shooting guns out the windows.
A land of gas, if you will. A sort of gas land.
And so you roll some dice. You get to assign them to your 3 cars. You have a buggy, a medium normal car, and then a large sort of van or heavy. And so you assign these dice. This is how far they're going to move. And then during your turn, you also have a command die that you get to assign along with that car, and that does a variety of stuff from...
Well, once per round. Once per your 3 activations, you get to assign a command die. For what it's worth, the rules about when and how you get to assign command dice are a little unnecessarily restrictive. We just dispensed with that midway through our last game.
And that'll let you either move faster, bring an attack chopper down, lets you move through, lets you do an array of things. And then you're trying to get, depending on the mode you're playing, you're either trying to get to the end of the road, you're trying to be the last one standing, you're trying to do things.
Oh, well, you're definitely trying to be the last one standing. That's
blow
for sure.
up your friends.
To its credit, I think Thunder Road does a reasonably good job with player elimination. Reasonably good. If it is the case that a player gets entirely eliminated from the game, that triggers the end of the game, and it means that either once someone crosses the last tile that's currently in play, they win immediately, or whoever's the last one left standing will win. And frankly, I have never felt that after someone's eliminated, that the game takes too long to conclude. What I have felt, however, is that once you've lost one or two of your cars, and or if you're not a threat, you can be in the game and irrelevant for a little bit longer. It doesn't ever drag. I mean, things move reasonably quickly in Thunder Road. But frankly, after you've lost even one of your cars, or if all your surviving cars are already heavily, heavily damaged and you don't feel like you're in a position to throw them around much, you can still feel like you're kind of been sidelined. I don't know if that's been your experience.
No, I don't mind it so much. I know I made a big deal about it, but I'm very sure that when you explain this game, when you teach it, you really need to explain that your cars are going to blow up.
Yeah.
This is not a game where, everyone makes it to the finish line and everyone's happy. Your cars are going to blow up.
There are no happy endings.
There's a chance you're going to be eliminated, but don't worry. Either we're going to run again or, the game triggers. The game, like you just said, the game end will trigger as soon as everyone loses all of their cars, and then we'll get on to something else or play again.
Every car gets to fire every time it moves. There's other ways to put firepower into people, and it only takes 2 hits to eliminate a vehicle. And yes, there are ways for the car to come back, but there are also a whole bunch of ways for a car to be eliminated flat, such that it will never ever come back. And sometimes, and this is when I think Thunder Road is at its best, this is because you took a risk. You decided to put your car in a dangerous place, either so as to try to snipe off an opponent or because this represents some sort of advantage. Sometimes, though, you're in a very, very risky spot just because random things happen. And a lot of random things happen in Thunder Road. It is not just that your movement is random, so a little bit of the roll to move vicissitudes rear their ugly heads in the context of Thunder Road, but also you might just get shoved around. And maybe you have a large car that's been ran by a small car, and in theory, that in all likelihood, you should be the one who should be in control in that situation. But sometimes not, because dice are what dice are. And you get shoved around a couple times, and then suddenly you just get flat eliminated because of a couple of fluky results. Because the race tiles are reasonably tight. There's not a whole lot of places to hide, which is good, but by the same token, there's a lot of places where one wrong move or one bad die roll, and you're gone.
It's true, and how Carnival Chaos differs than that is that there's 3 lanes coming into this central, I don't want to say dome. No, it's not a dome.
It's not a dome. It's not a dome.
It's an arena.
It is an arena of lightning. It is a lightning arena. It is not, we're going beyond the alternatives.
That's right.
We're going beyond a dome of thunder, and oh crap. How are the lawyer gibbons? Are they up to date? Did they pass the bar? Please tell me they passed the bar exam.
No, that's dangerous.
Ooh.
They're banned now.
Tina don't like that.
Nope. So they all lead into this central arena area, and instead of in the normal game, you're just going forward down a straight track, no going back, get to the end, win. Now you're all merging into this dome, and it's pretty well last person standing.
It's hex-based movement, and now suddenly you have a point system.
Yes, you're getting these scrap points. Every time you damage someone or eliminate someone, you get some scrap points, and whoever has the most scrap points will be the winner.
Well, more to the point, every time an opposing car is damaged or eliminated on your turn, that's not the same.
True.
Because there are any number of bits of weirdness and craziness and collateral damage, and I bump into you, and so you bump into Huey, and then Huey bumps into Louie, and then suddenly there's a whole bunch of dead people. And whoever's turn it was, whoever started that nonsense, they get to pocket all the points. Now, there's a fair number of the classic multiplayer conflict problems in the context of Carnival of Chaos. Precisely because, as I mentioned before, every car can only take 2 hits before it's eliminated. And so frequently, the way to do well, in my experience, in Carnival of Chaos is you look around the board, you check to see which cars already have 1 damage on them, go kill them. There you go. Go shoot them. That's a way to get a lot of points. That having been said, when it's this light and this quick, it's hard to take it too seriously. It's just also worth noting that in fairness, in the entire breadth of the multiplayer free-for-all combat thing, because that's what Carnival of Chaos does. Thunder Road, in its default mode, is close to a sort of free-for-all whacking kind of thing, but the racing elements are sufficiently pronounced and sufficiently internalized to the victory conditions that it's not quite that. Carnival of Chaos is straightforward multiplayer free-for-all combat thing. And I was very disappointed with the dynamics, but then I took a step back and said, okay, what are its peers? compared to its peers, how is it as a multiplayer free-for-all combat thing? And there's pretty much only 2 games that I've played that do multiplayer combat really well, and those are Black Rose Wars and Cosmic Frog. I don't think Carnival of Chaos is as good as that, but I do think it's a fair bit better than a lot of these other 2-hour sloggy, last-hit-kill bits of nonsense. So it's light, and it's arbitrary, and it's hard to take seriously, but it doesn't overstay its welcome, at least.
It's true. Lots of chaos going on. We have these...
It's like a carnival.
We have these killer pillars
of
that
chaos
shoot up out of the ground, that launch you into the air and destroy you immediately.
The name of the expansion.
Literally the name of the expansion. You also get super weapons, Mark. So they want to make sure you have other things to grab as opposed to just going around and killing other cars. So you want to zoom around and get these party favors. You have these super weapons that you want to pick up.
In the base game, there are hazard tokens, which might go all the way from doing nothing to eliminating your vehicle outright. Again, it's just the nature of the beast. And these hazard tokens are strewn about in most of the places you want to go. In Carnival of Chaos, those are replaced with party favors, which range all the way to get a little bit of an extra movement to be able to eliminate somebody flat. And then there are these super weapons, which are fully gonzo, but here at least finally I'm able to point to a collection of things and say, okay, fair enough. These are just fun gonzo. My favorite example of this was the super weapon that Dewey picked up the first time we played, where every time it hits, that vehicle gets to activate again. Not just fire again, but activate from scratch all over again. And this dovetailed beautifully with an arena modifier. There's Turbo Tina, all right? Just an important note, Turbo Tina does not turn. Anybody who suggests that Turbo Tina turns is not telling the truth.
And she's not an ant.
She's not an ant.
She might be an entity, but she's not entity.
Yes.
Okay, just make sure we're clear.
We've covered our bases.
Yeah,
I think,
all right, good.
I think it's all... Anyway, so what you do is you turn a Turbo Tina card. Wait, that's a little too close to the sun. Anyway, and the modifier this turn was you get to fire again every round. So everyone was already firing twice. And Dewey was now in a position where he had to miss twice in succession not to trigger his weapon. He took 5 turns. It was great. Was it balanced? No. But I couldn't care because it was at least fun.
Yes. Not only will this card give you a wacky ability for the round, it also will tell you which of the pillars are going to shoot up in the air. So lots of wackiness going on. I enjoyed it.
I felt that Carnival of Chaos was really this step towards absurdity that Thunder Road needed. I thought that Thunder Road was, in sometimes, the proper balance of madcap, don't take it too seriously, wild things are going to happen. But the things that happen aren't sufficiently cool or interesting to compensate for the occasional bad feeling of having your cars knocked out. That's at least the impression that I came down at the end of the day on Thunder Road. What about you, Walker?
I agree, and I thought they did a great job because it turns it from straight spaces into hexagons. And you'd think that would... not work, but it totally works just fine.
Yeah, because it devalues the movement, which is good because the movement is based on roll to move. And so many of my decisions felt forced in Thunder Road because you're obliged to move the full movement. Now, consequently, in Carnival of Chaos, there's a little bit too much of the space counting that I don't really like. It's like, okay, well, I'm moving 5 spaces and I want to end up here. Well, if I go this way, I got a movement point left over. Okay, can I waste a point of movement on the way? Yes, I can by going the longer route. Okay, this is how I end up that direction. Not a huge fan of that, but there wasn't a whole heck of a lot. And ultimately, I think that Carnival of Chaos just, bumps up the ridiculousness to 12. And so consequently, I think it forces you to not take it seriously, whereas occasionally in Thunder Alley, you're tempted to.
And for the games we played this week, we also used the Chop Shop expansion, which gives you player powers.
Yes.
So that changes your command board, and they all fit together, nicely, right? So now you have a different command board. Slightly changes up, the attack helicopter drift turbo thing. So I thought that was great. There was some really interesting characters in that.
What do you want to be when you grow up, Walker?
I want to be a Nitromancer?
A Nitromancer. Yes,
I want to be
obviously the best of professions.
Obviously the best character.
It's a bit of a shame, and this I think I can segue to a slightly broader conversation of some of Restoration Games' product lines. So prior to Thunder Road, the one Restoration game that I could point to and say I really like this, they picked a good old game, and I think they did a good job with it, was Conspiracy. They renamed it the Solomon Gambit, a super obscure auction game that Milton Bradley did back in the day. Not a whole lot of people have played Conspiracy. I think it's a shame. I think it's pretty good. When playing Crossbows and Catapults, when playing Unmatched, and when playing Thunder Road, I have the same vibe. And the vibe is as follows. The base game isn't enough, and the Kickstarter all-in is too expensive and doesn't justify its cost and is too much money for too light an experience. And that's how it's been my strong impression for all of them. I think, with respect to Thunder Road Vendetta, the Chop Shop expansion by itself gives it enough of a shot in the arm to give you a little bit more of the craziness, a little bit more player asymmetry, player asymmetry, which the base game does not have at all, and a few more toys to mech around with. We've tried a number of the other expansions that are involved in the all-in Kickstarter version. That's the one we have. It's called Maximum Chrome. But frankly, all the ones other than Chop Shop, I would happily get rid of.
We also played with the big rig in the final 5. This gives you like a giant tractor trailer with like 3 cars behind it, like a train.
I liked it
and a bunch
principle.
Of motorcycles. Yeah, in principle. And I think, and if you play Thunder Road Vendetta enough, I think that adds enough of a variety that you might enjoy, like having a bunch of motorcycles and a giant truck instead of
I suppose
the normal cars.
I would say this. The base game of Thunder Road Vendetta did not have enough to hold my attention because I played the retail version and I thought it was kind of cute, but didn't really have enough variety or enough control, again, to compensate for the bad feelings in a lot of the forced plays. Chop Shop, I think, does a great job of introducing player powers and asymmetry and a non-trivial amount of aesthetic appreciation, just a little bit more about the world, like the psychotic clown that drives around, the nitromancer, things like that. I think that Carnival of Chaos is also a very worthwhile expansion. It is not included in the Maximum Chrome version. It is a separate thing. So if I were you and curious about Thunder Road Vendetta, I would get the retail version of Chop Shop as well. I think Maximum Chrome is too far, but I think that either Chop Shop or Carnival of Chaos is an elevation of the base game experience. A lot of the other expansions, they just add different kinds of damage. Your car can now be on fire. There's different kinds of hazards. Whatever. It's kind of okay, but I don't think it quite justifies its price or the additional rules grit. I think your best value is with Carnival of Chaos and with Chop Shop, frankly.
This is definitely one of those games that many people have tried to do. Like, there's like the dungeon crawl game.
Yeah.
And endless numbers of trying to get just the right mix.
Yeah.
And that's the same sort of thing, a post-apocalyptic car racing game. And I think this comes close, right? We want Car Wars, but we want it to be playable. You want a board game version of Gaslands. We want Formula Day with weapons.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think this comes close. And I think it's just missing in some things. And one of the things I think it's missing is in the shooting, right? You have to be point blank, and you shoot at the 3 front squares, and you shoot something.
And it's my bigger problem is how coarse it is. The difference between doing no damage and doing half the hit points of the car is huge. And I think that a little bit more granularity would have been nice, especially given that a lot of the damage tokens effectively kill you anyway.
True. I mean, what I'm talking about is just more of a theme, right? Because it doesn't even really say what you're shooting. Like, you should be shooting a pistol or something where some of these games thrive on, I have the, twin turbo.
The toys from the super weapons.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you.
And they don't have to do much more, but just having a card in front of you that shows this weapon, and I can now say I'm shooting you with X, will, I think, add that much more flavor and feel to this type of game.
I don't insist that it be through the weapons, but I was actually quite surprised at how bland is too damning, but how generic the factions were in the base game of Thunder Road. I think the Chop Shop really should have been part of the base game, frankly. Games like this really do thrive on having toys and character and personality and asymmetry.
But not too much, right? Because the flow of this game is real. Like, the shooting takes almost 0 time.
It's true.
The collision, there's not this, did you hit a curb? Well, you hit it on a 45-degree angle.
Yep.
What speed was this car going? What speed was that car? There's none of that. There's a little bit, my car was bigger than yours, so I get to re-roll. That's the difference. Otherwise, you get pushed to where the die tells you to go. Moving on, next player, go.
How would you, they're in some ways very different games, but in some ways very similar. How would you rank Thunder Road in any of its incarnations to Tiny Turbo Cars, for example? Because I know that's one you have in your collection that you enjoy.
I think it's just very different.
I agree, but there's still the multiplayer car race with combat and wackiness.
True. But Tiny Turbo Cars, you're more just trying not to blow up yourself.
Fair.
And figure out how to...
I mean, that's a fair priority in the context of Thunder Road.
But I mean, like, that is the centerpiece. You're just trying to, like, maneuver around things and trying to get your puzzle thing moved to a space where you're actually trying to get further ahead.
Yeah, so instead of having to sock a 4 or a 6 to a car, you get to play with a cool little slidey puzzle thing.
Which is a lot more... which is the majority of the game as opposed to just I pick this 3 as opposed to this 4.
Fair. I would rather play Tiny Turbo Cars. I would rather play Fast and the Furious Highway Heist, the co-op game by Prospero Hall. I would infinitely prefer Gaslands, but at the point of Gaslands, you're talking about a substantial financial commitment. Well, just play with rocks and some Hot Wheels. Anyway, but you're talking about a substantial rules commitment.
Yeah. And this teaches super fast. You're rolling 4 dice, you assign them to the cars, and off you go. It's pretty quick.
It is. You're right. The actual gameplay is super quick.
And the setup
a game will finish in about 45 minutes. The setup is quick. You're right. The barrier to entry is super low. It is perhaps unfair to compare it to these other games that are more complex in terms of rules, somewhat more laborious in terms of rules explanation. I would say that the flow is equally good in a lot of these other games, Gaslands accepted. Gaslands will be, until everyone really knows what they're doing, it's a little bit of a slog. But you still get in these other games crazy moments, laugh-out-loud moments of weird things happening, but without the bad feelings of having elimination, because again, it's not so much player elimination, it's more like being elimination so you don't feel like you get to do much on your turn, which is the worst kind of elimination. And at the same time, I would maintain that Thunder Road Vendetta is best experienced with at least one of Carnival of Chaos or Chop Shop, if not both.
Let's just talk very briefly about number of players, and I just think that it works just as fine at the full 4 players. Or does it go to 5?
You can play with 5 if you're inclined to once you start adding in the final 5 in the big rig, but
I think it might get a little crowded on the track itself and maybe take a little bit long. But I think at 4, I think it works just fine. I don't think there's too much downtime. I think it moves at a quick pace.
I agree. No, you're right. Thunder Road is definitely lighter, quicker, more visceral. It's just I don't think that the visceral payoff is...
I agree. There's just something there that's missing. It just doesn't seem to just hit that perfect thing that we're looking for.
So that's Thunder Road Vendetta, both the Maximum Chrome version and the new expansion Carnival of Chaos. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your spending the time. That's going to do it for this week for So Very Wrong About Games. We hope to see you again soon. Please do take care of yourselves and take care of your hobby.
Peace!
You've been listening to So Very Wrong About Games, a board gaming podcast about board games produced by Michael Walker and edited by Mark Bickman. You can find all our information at SoWrongGames.com. Special thanks to What Does It Eat for allowing us to use their most excellent song, FOS, as our intro. You can find them at WhatDoesItEat.com. We hope to see you again soon, and as always, try to be right, but remember you're so very wrong.